Okay, folks. So we're going to start out with some serious news. So you may remember last week this headline surfaced in the Jerusalem Post. Donald Trump to announce U.S. recognizes Palestinian state. Gulf diplomatic source claims. Now, Russ and I did not make a big deal out of this because we're very immature. We won't take yes for an answer. We just don't
Yeah,
want to give Trump credit for anything. We're just some naysayer, negative Nancy's
we're
over
just
here.
progressives.
Yeah, we can't help it,
We need to get on board
Right. Yeah.
and help
So
out and pitch in.
right, right,
Who
yeah,
cares if it's Trump?
right. Or who cares if it's actually real? I mean, that's a
Yeah, who
flaw we're
cares if
trying to
it's real?
overcome.
That doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
yeah,
Look, if Trump would pass universal health care, if Trump would increase the minimum wage, if Trump would strengthen unions, he would be the greatest president ever.
right. Yeah.
Right? So if he just says some offhanded shit, a guy who starts screaming about Taylor Swift after coming back from the Middle East, that's somebody you should take really seriously when he vaguely is rumored to have maybe said something about recognizing a Palestinian state, which in and of itself wouldn't really mean anything either.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. But um, this was in the news, and Ambassador Mike Huckabee quickly poured cold water on that. Jerusalem Post needs better sources than this unidentified source. My 4-year-old grandson Teddy is more reliable. And take it from Teddy, this report is nonsense. Israel doesn't have a better friend than the President of the United States. Well, turns out there may be a Palestinian state in the works, but looks more and more like that state might be Libya. That's the only unfortunate part, is that, yes, you might have a Palestinian state being formed in the state of Libya, as it turns out. Trump administration working on plan to move 1 million Palestinians to Libya. NBC
Hmm.
exclusive. The Trump administration is working on a plan to permanently relocate up to 1 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Libya. 5 people with knowledge of the effort told NBC News. The plan is under serious enough consideration that the administration has discussed it with Libya's leadership. 2 people with direct knowledge of the plans and a former U.S. official said. In exchange for the resettling of Palestinians, the administration would potentially release to Libya billions of dollars of funds that the U.S. froze more than a decade ago, those 3 people said. No final agreement has been reached, and Israel has been kept informed of the administration's discussions, the same 3 sources said. The State Department and the National Security Council did not respond to multiple requests for comment before this article was published. After publication, a spokesperson told NBC News, "These reports are untrue. The situation on the ground is untenable for such a plan. Such a plan was not discussed and makes no sense," the spokesperson said. Okay, so I know what some of our naysayers might be saying. Well, Keaton, why would you lend credibility to this report but not to the Jerusalem Post report saying Donald Trump is going to recognize a Palestinian state? Well, that's a fair
It's a
enough
fair
question.
question.
That's a
It's
fair
fair.
question.
I was wondering that myself.
Yes, Russell was
Like,
going to.
maybe I should have looked over this segment first.
Yes, Russell is about to quit the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's about to resign in protest over
I've got I've
my
got my
bias.
bug out bag right next to me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there is one thing that I think lends some credibility to this, which is if you remember last week, Netanyahu says Israel will finish the war in Gaza and drive out 50% of Palestinians. So 50% of Palestinians would be about 1 million people. That would be
Right.
that the math works out on that. There were 2.3 million to start. A few 100,000 were, of course, murdered. And that leaves about 2 million left, half of which is 1 million, which, of course, corresponds to the number that Donald Trump is planning on relocating to Libya. So I think that gives a little credibility to this reporting. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that Israel would complete its military objectives in Gaza and force out at least 50% of the population. On Tuesday, Netanyahu said even if Israel agrees to a temporary pause for the release of hostages, it will resume its military operations in Gaza. We in the coming days will be entering with all our strength to complete the process. There will not be a situation where we stop this war. In his remarks, Netanyahu confirmed that Tel Aviv was working to fund countries to take in Palestinian refugees, believing that at least half could be forced out of their homelands. What might that country be? Libya is what the NBC report says, according to sources with knowledge of the matter. So again, this seems to be checking out. Okay, we don't know it for sure, but it seems to be checking out, believing that at least half could be forced out of their homeland. But there is one problem. We need countries to receive them, he continued. This is what we are working on right now. If you give them an exit, I am telling you that more than 50% will leave. In my opinion, much more. Aside from that, we know this past week here, starting on Thursday, going through till today, these have been some of the bloodiest days since October 7th. Israel begins Gaza ground operation, kills 140 in relentless bombardment. That was today. This is today's reporting. The Israeli military announced the start of extensive new ground operations throughout northern and southern Gaza. On a day it killed at least 140 people in waves of relentless strikes across the Palestinian enclave. At least 36 people were killed and more than 100 wounded when Israeli warplanes bombed a tent camp sheltering displaced Palestinians in the Al-Mawasi area of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, medical sources told Al Jazeera. At least 135 people were killed on Sunday morning, including 42 in the heavily bombed northern parts of Gaza, medical sources told Al Jazeera Arabic. 5 journalists were also among the victims when their homes were bombed. At least 464 Palestinians have been killed in the past week as the Israeli military prepared to significantly intensify its ground invasion of the Palestinian territory despite international criticism. So, again, you add all of this up. You have reports of a resettlement plan for Libya. You have Netanyahu this week saying they're going to ramp up their efforts with the express intention of driving half of the population, i.e. 1 million Palestinians, out. Now you have some of the bloodiest days of the conflict happening since that statement was made. And Steve Witkoff today on Sunday said, for all of the talk of a rift between Trump and Netanyahu, that they are essentially on the same page as of now.
President John is a humanitarian, and I think that everyone is concerned about the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. That said, it is a very complicated situation there. Logistically, I don't think there's any daylight between President Trump's position and Prime Minister Netanyahu's position. The issue now is, how do we logistically get all of those trucks into Gaza? How do we set up the aid stations? There are many initiatives that we're working on to address this.
Okay. So what I think is going on here is that the rift between Trump and Netanyahu is more over Iran than Gaza. I think that what's happening is Trump does not want a war with Iran. I think he's proud of the fact that he didn't start a new war when he was president the first time. I think he would consider a war with Iran a stain on his legacy this time. And so I think there is some tension and some disagreement about that. I also think that Trump figures, hey, you know what? If we can get the Palestinians out of Gaza and help Israel annex the West Bank, essentially all of the West Bank, you know what? I will have done my $1 million worth for Miriam, and I'll let President J.D. Vance start the war with Iran, or President Pete Buttigieg, if we lose, start the war with Iran. I don't think he wants that. And I think his thinking is, you know what? The more of Palestine I could get for them, the more of a chance they might let me get away with not bombing Iran. That's my guess. My guess is as good as anyone's. It's probably not as good as many people's. But there seems to be no question that this onslaught will not stop until the Palestinians are displaced. And Trump seems totally on board with that, i.e., not much of a Palestinian state to speak of in the near future, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I didn't get more excited about that.
I said, Miriam, what do I have to do to only take the 6 inches?
Yeah, right.
You know I can't sit down when you use the 12. She said, Gaza. I need Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry I doubted you. You make a good case. I'll unpack the bug out bag now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You make a good case. Yeah.
I mean, they clearly want to put him somewhere. They're clearly not going to stop until they find a place to put him.
With Libya, well, this is what we predicted from the beginning they were going to do.
Yes.
They would make it unlivable in Gaza, and then they would use that to pressure surrounding countries through bribery and political pressure from the United States to take in enough Palestinians that they've essentially got Greater Israel. This has always been about the Greater Israel project. Libya is a little bit of a curveball. From what we know, that country has already essentially collapsed into barbarism and slave markets. So what infrastructure is there even there or government to deal with? But maybe that's part of the attraction, that there's no real government to resist it.
What are they going to say?
So maybe they could just move them there and there's really nobody to do anything about it.
Right.
Because it's already a destroyed place. Maybe that's their vision. Hey, we'll just establish a Palestinian homeland away from the Israelis and they can rebuild their society here in Libya and, fuck the Libyans. We don't really care about them anyway. And what are they going to do about it? It seems feasible. More feasible than moving them into Jordan, which has already taken an enormous amount of Palestinians. The Egyptians are not going to agree to it because these countries have to worry about the social and economic instability that would accompany a mass inflow of Palestinians. Whereas, Libya couldn't really say anything. Who's there to say anything?
Right. Yeah. So that's a possibility. But I think either way, Donald Trump's short-term goals for Israel are going to be displacing people from Gaza and taking as much of the West Bank. I think that is the priority. And I think part of why that's going to be prioritized is because he doesn't want a war with Iran.
Yeah, right.
And I think he figures if he can get them that, he will have done his part. He will have earned his 100 million. Hey, thanks for watching our video. We're currently raising money to produce our documentary film on the Uhuru movement. Go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in.
Every dollar you give goes towards the project. We do not take any kind of salary on these. We mostly live on Gatorade when we're on the road, so even solid food is iffy, just enough to get by. But we do not take any pay for this. Every dollar actually goes into what we need to shoot the project. The Uhuru movement is a subject that really deserves more exposure. Everybody heard about it through the court case, and that was an important thing to elevate. But they've done incredible community work demonstrating a different way that is socialist and not dependent on the government at the same time, which a lot of people don't even realize that still exists in the tradition of the Black Panther food and education programs. And to show there is such a strong community like that with such strong leadership is really important, particularly at this historical moment.
Yeah, so we're really excited about doing the project, but we need your help. So go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in. Thanks very much for your support.
Please clap.